Now I would request Ishwari to open for the session 2. Ishwari will be moderating the panel discussion. We'll have a BCG representative, we'll have a TCS representative, and we'll have one senior representation from Terry University. Over to you, Ishwari.
Okay, then, all right. Hello, guys. Thank you so much for joining and still being here. Okay, so the motive of this panel to discussion is we want to know, or we want to understand, how can we leverage India's net zero commitments or goals for actually the betterment of the this manufacturing sector. To delve into that, hopefully you will have a nice cup of chai with you, and to deep down with you, we have three wonderful panelists to talk about the three major aspects, that is gender equity, climate finance, and integration of clean tech. So to shed light upon how can we integrate gender into the manufacturing practices, we have Ms. Sudeshna Chaudhary. She's the owner of the TCS offering, which focuses on the climate-centric scenario. And along with that, she is also a head of the Asia chapter for women in data. So hi Sudeshna, thank you so much for being here. Can you hear me?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are. All right, Sudeshna, thank you so much for being here. So to deep dive into climate finance, we have with a really great climate veteran, as we like to call him. So we have Mr. Vivek Adhya over here. He's the associate director at BCG, and he has worked with several think tanks and climate-based startups for them to reach the net zero vision. Thank you so much for being here, Vivek.
Thank you so much for having me here. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you. And to speak about the integration of clean tech and the policy angle, we have a very knowledgeable person with us. So, Mr. Shirish Karud is the senior director for renewable energy from Terry. He has a vast experience on integration of clean tech and how can we leverage policy frameworks to actually address net zero. Thank you so much for being here, Shirish sir.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Okay, so we can start with this panel discussion. Okay, so until this point, we have heard a lot of points about, net zero, decarbonization, how can we integrate clean tech, so many other things. But then the one key thing which everybody misses, and I would like to point it out, how can we integrate gender equity into the actual manufacturing cycle. So that is one thing nobody speaks about or hardly speaks about. But before coming to gender equity, I would like to deep dive into the policy aspect of things. So like recently, maybe in the last month, we have seen the great launch of National Green Hydrogen Mission. So according to me, there are many schemes like that, but hardly anybody knows how can they leverage it for themselves or their factory. So my question is for Shirish sir, is that how can the MSMEs can leverage such policies to help them reach towards their net zero goal? Over to you, Shirish sir.
Thank you. I think a very important point. See, net zero discussion has, come into picture very recently. Before that, we had energy efficiency, renewable energy integration, and emission reduction. and now we are looking towards a net zero scenarios. And if you look at it, it is important that each and every citizen and each and every institute or organization, whether big or small, should be part of this mission. Then only it can be going to be a successful mission. It's not only government which is announcing policies and regulations for this, but it is everybody's responsibility to achieve this. If you look at the MSME sector per se, it is part of the larger chain of manufacturing industry, or industry per se is a supply and manufacturing. If you look at it now, and the we had a very good success stories of big companies just now, Tata Motors, and who are a visionary companies. So they have the vision that what future should be. So especially if you look at Tata Group, they started with steel industry way back in 1900. When in that too, when you had a British Raj, and so for us, for an Indian a person to start an industry of that scale was really it has to be driven by the vision. So that vision continues, and as he mentioned, many activities they started before all this topics even not even discussed. So that is one aspect. But as a MSME, MSME is part of the value chain, and we have been doing a lot of studies for MSME, especially from the perspective of integrating renewable energy or clean energy in the operations. See, the MSME typically have issue because they are generally constrained on capital availability. They don't have extra capital available for doing something extra beyond the business as usual, and most of them get trapped in that business as usual scenario, and and then they don't find ways to go out of the way to look at all these aspects. But now because the MSME are part of the supply chain, and if you look at the carbon footprint monitoring and all, we have three scopes: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 and scope 2 are something which companies can do for themselves. Scope 3 is they have to tab or rope in their suppliers and rope in their vendors also, and rope in their their other partners like transporters, their shop owners, their ancillary units, their component suppliers, and automobile particularly has large number of such ancillary units. And most of these units have definitely they need electricity, which can come from renewables. And now this renewable electricity can come directly from their own rooftops, as shown by Minda and Tata Motors, or they can purchase this electricity through various means. Earlier, it was only, they have to buy electricity through the discoms. But now, open access, regulation has been passed. And that with that regulation, anybody having more than 100 kilowatt load can go for open access to buy green electricity particularly. And this can be bought through discoms also, or through other supplier, generator of green electricity. So this is a major avenue to decarbonize your own operations. The second, we have done a lot of audits for circularity and efficiency, resource efficiency, not only energy efficiency, but resource efficiency. So for example, galvanizing units can use electricity and other resources more efficiently by some designing and recovery of raw materials used like acids, etc., And then there are technologies available for that. And in one of our projects in Aurangabad and in Chennai, we actually carried out demonstration of these technologies for material recovery and circularity with the MSMEs. And all these technologies are now available. And also along with that, SIDBI has green fund where they can give loan and special funds. Companies which are looking for ESG funds and environment, social and governance compliant fund. So they need to have their suppliers also using these concepts of circularity and energy, green energy or clean energy. So there is a lot of opportunities for MSMEs to do that, and institutes like TERI can help them out also in how to go about it. So that is a message I would like to tell. And secondly, as you mentioned about hydrogen mission, hydrogen is basically looked upon as a fuel, as a raw material, and as an energy storage material. So as a fuel, it can be used in industries like direct burning of hydrogen. It can be used as a raw material in steel industry, for example, for reduction of steel ore. In cement also, it can be used for burning as a fuel. And other industries like petrochemical and fertilizers, they are using hydrogen as it is, as a raw material, and there they can be used. Apart from that, hydrogen, we are looking at green hydrogen industry per se, it by itself. So one can put electrolyzer and generate hydrogen and store it or supply it to various hydrogen users, or through CNG network, pipe gas network in cities. Hydrogen can be mixed with compressed natural gas to 18%, and that can be used, which will reduce its emission intensity of the and also improve its calorific value. So hydrogen mission has been launched, and the government has given specific funds for a variety of activities, including pilot projects, demo projects, research and development, and actually large-scale projects. So there are a variety of things happening at government end, and the industry has to come forward, and they need support in terms of, as mentioned earlier, you need to have a separate team for all these activities. But not necessarily you have to have a big team. You can have one nodal person, and you can take help from people like us who are in the field and who can advise you or guide you on proper ways to integrate renewables or integrate the sustainability and circularity in your operations. I'll stop here, and over to you.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. I think the points you made, how can we actually utilize the policy measures by doing some very, small practical things were helpful. The next question will be for Vivek to actually implement these, policies on ground. The mostly what we face is, the lack of funding, or, the lack of financial help to actually implement these things on ground. So how can you suggest that these people can bridge the gap for the clean tech implementation and finances? And do you have any real life case studies from India or for globally to actually support, that how they have managed to do it? Over to you, Vivek.
Thank you, Ishwari and Zahir and Megha and Horen, everybody at ISC for bringing me on this dais, on this panel. It's a privilege to come after such a respected stalwart, Shirish ji, and also share this stage with Sudeshna. I think maybe if I can just quickly set the context by sharing a couple of slides. Let me know if you all can see my slides. Ishwari, I think,
Yes, we
ultimately,
can see.
ultimately it all boils down to finance, and
Definitely.
we do have policy instruments, we do have the capacity gaps in MSMEs and stuff. uh, I think just as a flavor, what is happening here on green finance is there is always this comparison about who's doing better. Is it the BSC, is it the Nifty, is it the Green X, and invariably over the years we've seen organizations who have really embedded ESG and sustainability and equitable approaches have done well. Now, if you see the kind of investments that are coming through in recent years, both from international funds, multilateral funds, they've been rising very, very significantly. So, on one side, companies are doing well. On the other side, the fund coming into the climate context is also increasing very rapidly. We were just tracking some of the flows between 2016 and 18, and really some good research carried out by CPI and some of the other organizations. 248,000 crore green finance tracked. Most of it was in solar and wind, but you see those faint lines which come in with EVs and batteries and storage. This scene is changing very rapidly, and currently, if you see the last 5 years, bulk of the climate deals are happening in the transport space, in the automotive space. 90% went into transportation, energy, chemicals, and gas. Now, this really speaks volumes about the opportunity that all of us are sitting on board with. So this is where we really want to tap into the opportunities that's coming in. Startups which received funding are valued more than $7.5 billion. Again, 19 plus startups really getting in these kind of numbers and commercial funding. Now, what does it take to, really tap into some of these opportunities and things that are available? And I was so happy my colleagues from Tata Motors earlier shared about the GHG protocol and science-based targets initiative, right? So the first step is to measure and is to understand where your baseline is. And the moment you set up your goals or your targets, you know where you have to reach, what kind of reductions you need to achieve. But all of us, we are working with very thin margins and very thin resources to operate with. So how do you achieve net zero at the lowest possible cost? How do you get there? Amongst a plethora of options you might have, you can either fuel switch, you can, bring in energy efficiency, you can really look at process improvements, you can look at consumer awareness, and then doing a lot of other things there. But how do you do this at the lowest cost possible? And this is where something like carbon pricing comes in. Now, large companies are already pricing carbon and pricing the journey towards net zero. So they are really mapping the costs, and you may call it abatement curves, you may call it an internal carbon price, you may look at it from a shadow perspective. How do you price the journey and then look at different options and then select it based on how you might be able to get to that? Really helps lock in, and tap into the climate finance opportunities that come in. So organizations, most leading organizations, Tata Motors, Mahindra, everybody has used carbon pricing as a big lever. They've mapped out of all kinds of project opportunities that they get, uh, what seems to be the most economical or the right way to look at it. Uh, what is also important right now is to see, when we look at financing and when we look at some of the new technologies, the lens that investors are coming in, the lens that, multilateral funds are coming in, the lens that governments are looking at for financing into some of these aspects. We do have some amazing policy instruments. For example, we have say vehicle efficiency standards, and that will significantly improve the sectoral decarbonization that we are looking at. But vehicle efficiency standards for now possibly do not look at air conditioning into the vehicles, and whether it is the ICE based ones or the electric ones, that percentage will have an impact on the overall emissions and the energy that's being consumed for that vehicle. And I've read somewhere, and I'm doing a little more research, is the battery consumption for an electric car when the air conditioning is on versus otherwise, there's a huge difference. I think 30 to 40% of the battery charge is consumed just to operate the air conditioning. So how do you optimize some of these things? And that's where investments are going, and that's where people are looking at different aspects. Of course, we have the domestic carbon market coming in. We have a flurry of funds that are outlined both by the MSME ministry, by SIDBI, by various other organizations. We've got mainstream banks coming up with really targeted products. So I really encourage everybody to look at all the plethora of options that exist. Once you've embarked on your journey on the measurement, the goal setting, the carbon pricing part, really understanding where the reduction is, what kind of policy instruments to tap onto, and then really tap into the most appropriate funding channel that's available, and happy to point out and support. The list is far too long in the initial reactions I'm giving right now, but happy to dive deeper and deliberate upon specific funding or investment pipelines. I'll pause here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a deeper insight upon the financial landscape. How can we bridge this gap? Okay, so moving on from finance for now, moving to gender equity, as I said, it's a least talked about thing, especially on the shop floor, especially in the manufacturing sense, that we hardly see any women on the shop floor. So my next question will go to Sudeshna, of course. To ensure we reach this equitable net zero goal, what do you think the factories can do to achieve this gender equity? Like what steps can they take? The low hanging fruits, the all the small things they can think of doing to achieve this goal. Over to you, Sudeshna.
The most important, first of all, thanks, Ishwari, and good evening, everybody. The most important thing about this whole question of yours is the time we are in. And this is the time where there is an energy transition happening. And why it is important is the transition phase becomes very crucial for changing perceptions. There is nothing new that we need to know how gender equity can bring in a difference, be it access to the best available talent, be it strengthening team dynamics, reduce staff turnover, long-term relations, better work environment. We can have, a long list of things to mention, and that's known to everybody. But the point is that in spite of that, the type of job has always historically built a preconceived notion of the choice of profession by gender. So now let me give you some historical facts. Miss Ila Majumdar, she was the first mechanical engineer of West Bengal and one of the earliest mechanical women engineers in India. And she was born in 1930. She joined her mechanical engineering course in 1947, around 47, 48. So in her biography, I had read that she was the only girl in a class of 30, 40, whatever number of students. And that is in 1947, and which is pretty expected. And also from her selection perspective, she had selected engineering because she was given almost a challenge that girls are not made for engineering, you better study medical. And she had both options. She could not decide what to do, but because she was challenged, she went into engineering. Now, everybody is not like that. So what I want to bring to the point is, she was the only girl in the whole class. And even after that, after 50 years later, when I was doing my graduation, in 1997, in that time frame, my roommate, she was the only mechanical engineer girl student in her class in a renowned university in Kolkata. So in all these 50 years, nothing has changed. And there has been no, generally speaking, a transition which the industry has gone through. And we have lived through our perceptions. If I talk of my own personal story, why to give others example? I was born and brought up in an industrial township. My father was an engineer. He was not a weightlifter. He was a normal human being. He was an engineer. I could have always thought that, okay, he is an inspiration for me to go for core engineering. I didn't do that because I was also part of that perception, though, no, shop floors are not for women. They are not safe. Come on. Safety is for men too, right? So it existed. It existed even during when I was a student. But when I come in today's world, things are much, much better. We do have students who are studying mechanical engineering. They are getting into manufacturing, and not only in administrative roles, they are also getting into really hands-on. And that is why I was so thrilled when I think in last year during Women's Day, Tata Motors published a video on the all-women manufacturing story of Tata Harrier and SUV. So why it made me happy is the awareness aspect of it. The way the video clearly calls out how technology has helped them with machines and robots, where now the skill is more towards operating the machines and not lifting them. I mean, whatever that preconceived notion we have towards genders. It calls out how their safety security is taken care and how they manage shifts, etc. So all of this is so encouraging, and it stands out to inspire thousands and lakhs of more girls to offer such career options. So it's very important to really change the perception, not only to others, but the people who will be actually working there. Unless girls are convinced that they can do it, nobody can enable for them. So for energy transition, this is the right time when new types of jobs are coming up, and consciously bringing in gender equity into the space will benefit all of us. The manufacturing organization, the education system, and the ecosystem supporting this, organizations like ISC who are working towards consciously doing something so that we have more gender equity, and we have the skill set to really have the people work into these areas. And working towards this and bringing this change is what is the need of the day. That's all from me.
All right, Sudeshna, thank you so much for sharing such interesting, facts. And the part I, really like that, like even after all this time, from 1947 to here, the reality has not changed much. So yeah, I think this might be a really high time to do that. We will come back to the that aspect later. I'm going back to Vivek. Okay, so I would like to understand from you that what are the best uh, you know you know you know uh, technological adaptation the MSME can make in least possible investment and least possible time for them to start their net zero journey. Like a specific case, or a specific starting point you would like to mention regarding that.
My bad, Ishwari. I think there was a break in my connection. Would you repeat the question again?
Sure. So maybe one interesting innovation that can help the auto component manufacturers, MSMEs, to achieve their equitable net zero goal in the least possible time and possibly least possible financial investment as well. So
Okay, yeah, I think multiple interesting innovations that I'm seeing within the sector. I'll try and touch upon a few in different dimensions. So when you look at innovation, the financial innovation example, India has been leading this globally, in terms of energy service companies, and how we were able to really use the ESCO model for energy transitions that we spoke about. A lot of this has been now flowing into the automotive sector, and one of my previous organizations really helped facilitate. So WRI and ESL helped facilitate the world's largest tender for e-buses that came in, and what this really does is this cuts back a lot of upfront investment that is required, and which in turn transitions the benefits all across the value chain, including MSMEs, OEMs, and manufacturers, to really get things moving. And the way you are able to then save on costs, emissions, and others, you are kind of paying back. The success of an ESCO model for an automotive space really depends on how we are able to structure the payment security mechanism, how we are able to tap onto the risk part of it and risk coverage part of it. Because unlike a clear-cut energy saving, where meters are installed and you're able to map out, and changing a light bulb versus upgrading a car is really different, and there needs to be specific context onto it. Something that we are now trying in India as a country. Globally, there were a few pilots that were carried out. US actually did something called as cash for grubs scheme, where you could turn back a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old inefficient car in lieu of certain discounts or benefits that you would get. So ultimately, the fleet upgradation happens without real barriers kind of standing in way of that fleet upgradation, because you may have best of the policy instruments, you may have financing, but unless you influence the consumers to upgrade the entire fleet that's been running on ground, we may not see those benefits and those challenges being addressed. Of course, on the manufacturing side within MSMEs, a lot of plug and play mechanisms are coming up. So rather than MSMEs using individual standalone boilers, 2-ton, 3-ton, 1.5-ton boilers, there is a replica of district heating and community heating coming in, and of course we've been hearing about steam house and many other such examples. So I think it's phenomenal to see these kind of aspects really coming to light on ground, and being available at the drop of a hat, which probably we would not have envisaged before. And with vehicle scrapping policies in India, with steel recycling policies in India, with EVs, and with all the other incentives that's coming up, I think this is our moment in the sun, and we should really come up with many more successful examples. But I hope these have been useful and helpful to just kind of give a flavor of what's happening on ground.
all right. Thank you so much, Vivek, for the very nice examples. I would like to extend the same question to Sudeshna as well. Do you think any latest technology, or like any something innovation of any step in the manufacturing processes can help increase the gender equity, or the participation of women in the manufacturing sector as of now?
See, in terms of, as I was saying, there are so many innovations which are really looking more at the safety security perspective, those can be called out. But personally, I have a belief that sometimes we really discriminate a good process and a bad process and say that, okay, this is not safe for women. Actually, that is for the betterment of everybody. So I don't consider that any particular process is really helps in gender equity. So the example I was giving, I never got the encouragement to work in a shop floor seeing my father. I was not inspired. One of the reason was not only the bias, but the reason also was the environment. The reason also was the accidents I used to hear in my early days as a kid into the blast furnace. Now, when it comes to a safety security, and those were the things used saying, okay, you shouldn't work because it's unsafe. Come on, if a blast furnace is sucking a person, it doesn't choose a woman, right? So the processes which are really technology is helping, there is surveillance, there is monitoring, there are safety features, those are really helping in diversifying our workforce. But it is meant for the betterment of the whole workforce, not only for a particular segment. That is my viewpoint.
Okay. All right. And do you think introducing automation in the manufacturing chain as of now, can it help increase the participation of women? Like, for example, just an thing I'm stating that in 2021 of September, Ola actually said that they would hire around 8,000 women on their shop floor just on the basis of all the things were kind of less manual and more automated. So according to you, these kind of changes or interventions, does that help in participation of women
Yeah,
on the shop floor?
see, if you, the video I was mentioning, if you look at the Tata Harrier video, which Tata Motors has published, the way the girls explain the ease of working, the ease of working that they have achieved after automation, after robots coming in, is amazing. And that is why they're opting to come into the industry. But the point I want to make it is, be it due to any reason, the technology advancement is not only for women. It is also not safe, or it is for human brain should be used to its best. Human brain is not for men, are not designated weightlifters. We have designated them with that caption, but we have not asked them whether you want to do it. Even they don't want to do it. They want to use their skill to its best. So yes, automation is helping women to opt for their career into engineering, into manufacturing shop floors. But the technology is being benefited by everybody.
Right. Just one last small question to you, Deshna. How can hiring a woman be a profitable case study for a MSME manager or an owner? How can he actually profit by hiring a women employee?
So again, the profit aspect comes that, see, immediately when you remove the bias of not hiring women, you get another 50% of the workforce to evaluate. So then you evaluate based on the skill set, the capability the person has, and not on the gender. So that is a very direct mapping, and we all know, and all of you are experts in hiring and skill development. So you all know that what it means to have a person with proper capability, because there is a 12 years of education which comes behind that. You cannot really create people and create skilled people overnight. So that is where the profit comes, and not for out of any regulatory compliance or by complying to SDG 5 and getting all those certifications, etc. It just comes from the level of skill set that you are getting and the productivity you are getting out of it.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Deshna. So we have got a lot of interesting things to hear, a lot of insights. We are here for the last question of this session, and that will go to Shirish sir. So, sir, how so we have been speaking about the automation and the new things which are coming. So, can you throw some light on how new innovative systems the automotive component manufacturing units can adopt at a commercial scale that can help towards making them profit, plus it can help them towards the net zero movement.
Thank you, Ishwari. I think the innovation is happening now everywhere. Manufacturing, handling, transportation, every aspect of business innovation is happening, and the innovation is happening because it gives a lot of benefits. That is why people are adopting it. And if you are not adopting it, your competitors must be adopting it because they want to be ahead of you. And one has to look into what is best for their own activities and own businesses, because innovation, automation is happening in manufacturing. It needs investments, but it also improves your efficiency, your output, your quality, and your reliability of the operation. So, the same way you can improve your energy efficiency by using solar energy. Say, for example, for heating and cooling applications, solar thermal can be used. As I mentioned earlier, electricity can be used. We have a lot of very small, industries which are using biomass gasifier instead of normal biomass, which they were using for, say, foundry applications or heating, press applications. And now they are using biomass gasification system, which improves the efficiency of the biomass utilization, and also it is more eco-friendly. And thereby they are saving their expenses and they are also getting better quality. Like that, as I mentioned earlier, galvanizing also is now improved with a lot of technology interventions to recover the material, recover the acids, other chemicals in the processes, reduce the water losses, reduce the energy losses. So one has to constantly look into what new is happening in my field and what new I can adopt. And as mentioned earlier, there are a lot of financing schemes, funding schemes which are available. Your principal, OEM can also help you out on this because it is in their interest also that they get a cheaper and better quality, consistent product. So it's a chain of relationships from top to bottom between the industries, which can help each other and grow and become sustainable and slowly go towards net zero.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. I think it's been really insightful to hear about a lot of different, perspectives, all the major facts, all the charts, all the graphs, all the numbers. I think it's been a really interesting session. Okay, so with this, we end this panel discussion. We have one last poll for you to answer. So, Huren, can you please launch the third and the last poll? Okay, so we have around 30 seconds to fill this. I would like to request all of you to fill the poll. Okay, so how can we increase women's participation in decarbonization process of automotive component manufacturing? Okay, so the most percentage has gone to inclusion of green skilling programs at the educational level, and the close second is a think the way we have written these options, they also show the level from top to bottom. That's a very weird coincidence. But yeah, the highest points will go to inclusion of green skilling and to make male workers and the factory workers aware, and the tools and policies and transportation stands at equal. All right then. Thank you so much for your participation. I think this ends our panel discussion, but I have one question for Shirish sir. It is one of the last question. While we are talking about MSMEs shifting to sustainable manufacturing practices, I would like to bring attention to another form of low carbon clean energy transition that's been happening in auto sector through the shift from ICEV to EV. So how can the MSMEs in ICEV supply chain can adapt themselves, equipped with the important skills so that they are not left behind, like in this change, in this transition. And to add to that, how can we particularly support MSME workers and women so that they are not left out in this transition? Like any insights, not from just you, but from all the speakers would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Meghanath. I think this is a very important uh, question because when such a transition is happening, the industries have to undergo real like a DNA change, because IC engine to EV is a big shift, and EV needs entirely different range of components and also very less number of components as compared to IC engine. And from that perspective, if company has to shift, of course there are certain companies which will be there, like tire companies or seat manufacturing or steering wheel manufacturing and all the bearing manufacturing, they will remain the same, but there will be some critical component like engine manufacturing. So one has to then probably look at from IC engine to BLDC motors. Because now as per the FEM policy, the original manufacturers have to manufacture the motors and critical components. So one of the, I think, another but important aspect is there are quite a new technologies one will have to adopt. For example, the controls for battery charging and safety and others, or the security systems, or the guidance systems. There are a number of variants which are coming, and with different vehicles, different variants. Everybody is coming with their own variety, and while there is a there are less number of components, but there are now more number of manufacturers which are coming in picture. Particularly two-wheelers, if you look at two-wheelers, and then there are additional features like Wi-Fi and battery charging, cameras for safety, automatic tracking, guidance systems, so many things. So one has to invest in these new technologies and new talent. Same IC engine talent may not work there, but there is a good opportunity. If you are already in business, you know the people, you know the environment, you can adopt it better than somebody new coming in and taking the place. So I think that flexibility has to be there. So you may have to shift from mechanical oriented activities to more towards electronic oriented or software oriented activities, but one need to do that shift because that is the transition happening.
Okay, Sudeshna, would you like to add some points into it?
Yeah, I want to add a different perspective on top of what Sir said. It's not the training. Training is same for everybody, but for specifically for women, the consideration comes, at least the kind of society we have till now, whenever it comes to a question of cross-skilling or upskilling, the time management part of it, while you are already working, prioritizing that you need that upskilling, that becomes very important. That change management is important. The ecosystem supporting that is very important. And the necessity behind it, then rather than going into something which you are not opting for, which you don't prefer, you don't want to stay back with, but you are just doing it to compromise with your other responsibilities. Rather than that, equally thinking of that upskilling or cross-skilling opportunity, going into those trainings, and then eventually getting into the new role. So that movement, and that is, same in every industry, that supporting that movement is where we have to focus on, so that we can enable them to execute that. Otherwise, it won't be a success.
Okay, great. I think we have gathered a lot of insights. The floor is now open for question and answer. I think there is one question. Okay, so how do startups willing to tackle the GHG emissions from transportation? Where is this global emission of 8 billion metric ton of CO2 present? Affordable scope 3 emission reduction ideation, reach out to the concerned transport authorities of India. This is the question for especially to Shirish sir and Rick is unfortunately not there.
I'm just trying to understand the question. The
Okay.
GHG emission from
Everyone-
transport, where this is global emission? Yes, transportation is one of the, because it is entirely so far more or less entirely dependent on fossil fuel, and reduction is happening in 2-3 ways. One is electrical vehicles. Second is the use of ethanol or alternate fuels in the IC engines, and third is of course use of hydrogen fuel cell or direct hydrogen in the vehicle, and of course the hybridization of different type of vehicles, EV plus petrol or EV plus flexible fuels and all. So as a startup, you are, if you are working on engine part of it or you are working on EV part of it, I will say you can reach out to the the authorities, transport authorities are now aware, and the policies are in place like FAME 2, or production link incentives and other initiatives. Some states are also have their own EV policies and things. So I think the concerned transport authorities are already in picture and they are driving these changes. It is the users and the service providers which can be tackled into. For example, if you can see now, Ola is coming up with its own EV, and then their own fleet they are changing from normal petrol bikes to the EV bikes. So there are a lot of these kind of opportunities for new startup to look into from EV perspective, and they can have their own fleet operations. So different business models and different ideas are coming up. I think I will stop there. I hope I have answered the question. Um, uh, my email, I will share it here on the chat box. Somebody wants it.
Yes, so the mail ID can be accessed through the chat box. The question has been simplified for you to standardize eco-driving activities amongst the commercial vehicles. What platform would be helpful to present it to the concerned authorities? That is the simplified version of the first question that was asked.
Form would be helpful to present this idea to concerned authorities to standardize eco-driving activities among commercial vehicles. Basically, well, you can have um, presentation or even social media, professional social media platforms like LinkedIn, where you can, talk about your idea or product or this thing. I think that's the way you can reach to the concerned authorities if you have any issue. I think that the government is also quite open about this. Ministries are open. They have the my government platform is there where you can share your ideas or your concerns with the ministries or even with the Prime Minister's office through email, and you will get definitely you will get response on that. Yeah. My
Okay.
email I have shared here on the with the host and panelists, so you can share it with the attendees. I can't do that probably.
Sure, sir. Sure. We will do that. Okay. So, do we have any more questions for the two panelists?
Yes, Ishwari, I wanted to ask Sudeshna one question. Sudeshna, there is this green labeling, I mean, to basically label the products or maybe incentivize the industries who are making sustainable products, right? I mean, that it is going on. Is it possible to have such kind of incentivize or kind of a credit system wherein companies who are promoting women participation or let's say women recruitment or let's say their involvement on the shop floor of MSMEs, is it a good idea or is it kind of very exclusive and away from the normalized industrial operations? What are your thoughts?
See,
Is
that
it
is
possible to
already there.
incentivize the companies? Yeah.
Yeah, that is already there, and group companies internally also incentivize in that manner. Say, for example, if I consider the utilities sector, I was into that for around 7-8 years. In utilities sector, when they are specifically committing on a SDG 5 goal, which is the gender equality goal, and say 50% by 2030 or 2040, whatever they are committing for their own organization, to reach to that target, they are incentivizing. So that model can be applied anywhere. And that is how it is. But compliance really cannot drive what is actually needed. It is to bring equal capabilities on the table. It should not be force-fitted. So incentivize is okay, but the main essence should be retained. That's very important.
Okay. Thanks, Sudeshna.
Okay. So, do we have any more questions from the participants? Okay, so I think this draws this session to the close. Thank you everybody for joining, for taking out their time. Thank you, Shirish sir. Thank you, Sudeshna, for coming here on this platform to offer such a great insight. So thank you so much for that. This draws this session to the close. I would like to thank all the panelists who joined, all the team of ACMA, Dinesh specifically for his support, for his constant encouragement to us, and of course all the audience who joined us today to actually learn and understand these great insights. Thank you so much for joining. We have this series to be continued, so we are planning to do multiple sessions based on this concept of net zero and how can we integrate equitable decarbonization and make it more mainstream across the automotive industry. We will keep you posted regarding the details of the future series. So yeah, until then, thank you so much for joining and have a really great evening. Just